Imagine a grand public library that once welcomed everyone. The shelves represent freedoms, press, expression, courts, elections. They used to be full, open, and accessible. Now, more and more shelves are locked behind glass, with signs saying, "Restricted access." Citizens can still walk the aisles, but the books they need to hold leaders accountable, they're missing. Meanwhile, at the front door, a new policy is posted. Entry requires a gold card. Those who can pay millions are ushered in through a velvet rope, while ordinary readers, like the 11 million waiting in line, are told to wait indefinitely as the doors creak shut. The result? A library that looks open from the outside, but is hollow within. Knowledge is gated, participation is stalled, and only the wealthy or the powerful can truly enter and use it. My friends, the global state of democracy that is going into 2026 warns that democracy worldwide is weakening under radical uncertainty. And the most serious threats to public freedoms are declines in freedom of the press, freedom of expression. And I'm experiencing that myself personally, and judicial independence and credible elections. These developments erode accountability, restrict civil space, and undermine the rule of law, leaving citizens with fewer protections and less ability to participate meaningfully in political life. So let's take a look at this, because we've got freedom of press, which declined in 43 countries, nearly 25% of those that were looked at. This is the broadest decline since 1975, signaling a major threat to public accountability and informed participation. Media restrictions, censorship, and selective access to information are reducing that transparency. And we all know what my favorite question is: how many times can you be lied to when you do not know the truth? Freedom of expression is also significantly under stress across multiple regions. Governments increasingly criminalize protest activity, restrict academic freedom, and limit dissent. Oh yeah, that works real well for your power. No, it takes it away. These curb silent opposition and weaken civil society's ability to hold leaders accountable. You want to hold a leader accountable? Have redeemable gold in the monetary system. And then you don't like what they're doing? You walk in and you pull out the gold. That forces fiscal responsibility and leadership accountability. What about judicial independence? Well, the rule of law is the weakest performing category globally. And that includes the U.S. I'm sorry to say this. 32 countries registered declines in 2024, with Europe accounting for 38% of these downturns. We're talking about advanced economies, and again, including the U.S. Politicization of courts and executive overreach undermines those checks and balances. How about credible elections and representations? How about that? Despite 74 national elections in 2024, representation scores collapsed to their worst level in more than 20 years. 7 times more countries declined than advanced. 7 times! Manipulated electoral processes and weakened parliaments reduce citizens' ability to influence governance. And so does the lack of accountability in finance. But again, redeemable gold would solve this issue. How about civil liberties and economic equality? Declines in access to justice and economic equality further erode rights. Vulnerable groups face exclusion, worsening inequality, and weakening democratic resilience. I'm telling you, 94 countries declined in at least one democratic factor between 2019 and 2024. 54% of the countries, only 55 countries, that's 32%, improved. And those declines, they're widespread across Africa and Europe and the Americas, Asia Pacific, and the West Asia. It's all over the world. Civic participation remains relatively stable, but resilience is fragile and very uneven. This matters because ultimately we are in a transition. We have choices now that we will not have in the future if we don't take action today and get redeemable gold back in the system. Because I'm telling you, confidence is required in this con game, and the public is losing confidence. This is why it's so important to become your own central banker and have your own foundation of sound money. So let's take a look at this confidence, because I'm telling you, take my word on this one, I'll put my technical neck on the line. If confidence falls to the lower levels, hyperinflation will become very, very visible to everyone, and it's game over. So where are we? Well, take a look at this particular graph, and this looks at public confidence between 1958 and 2025. And can you see that back in 1958, well, that public confidence was 73%. That was after World War II. There was a big baby boom. There was lots of growth, lots of everything going on, and the public had confidence in the governing system. But look at where we are right now. At the end of 2025, well, again, we are kissing the lowest level ever, with just 17% of the public having trust in government. When it goes below that, game over. There's no doubt in my mind. So where are we at with that? Let's take a look. This is the percentage of countries with significant advances and declines at the factor level. 54% of countries are declining, 32% of the countries are advancing. That's not very good odds. Where do you want to be in this? Can you see why it's so important to become your own central banker at this point in time? Critically important, because we're looking at rights, the rule of law, and representation here. Freedom of the press, judicial independence, credible elections, those are all declining. And what do we have left? All of them suffered broad declines in a 5-year period. So this can happen very quickly. That's why it's so important to be prepared. That's why I started preparing in 2008 when I saw what happened to the great financial crisis. That was the end of the system. That was the end of it. And taking a look at trust in the national government, it doesn't look so good either. 54% low or no trust in government. 54%. And if you don't trust the government, you're not trusting the central banks. And could it possibly be because you've lived through high or hyperinflation? I think so. In fact, when you look at the global protest tracker, something that I've looked at over the years, there were more than 128 significant anti-government protests that have erupted worldwide. More than 70 countries have experienced significant protests. Now, think about it. There's only 196 countries in the world, so these are some very, very high and growing numbers. There are 35 currently active major protests. And when the public comes together, we can make a difference. Even in Iran, that's talking about changing some of the tax laws and some of the laws because of all the protests. Iran, we can make a difference if we come together in community. 18 significant protests have occurred in countries that are not free. Like I said, like Iran and China and a number of other countries. Can you see the significance of this? Because if these kind of protests can erupt in countries that are not free, well, are any of us really free? But what does that really tell you? This is a global event. That's why I always call on a global community. If 3% of the population, just 3%, convert their garbage fiat government money into sound money that is above all governments and central banks, we can influence what happens next in our global monetary system. And we better. This is our opportunity. I've never seen a better one. Look, the Bulgarian government resigns following mass anti-graft protests. This is not just happening in one place. It is happening all around the world. And frankly, as legal immigration appears to freeze, President Trump launches the gold card to pay for the residency program. What is that gold card? Well, there it is. And remember, I've got the links to everything below. So if you want to follow this on your own, my preference is for you to form your own opinion on what's happening. That's why I always give you the links. But it's a $5 million card. What are the tax implications of this $5 million card? Well, quite frankly, the U.S. is the only country at this point that I know of that no matter where you live as a U.S. citizen, you're paying U.S. taxes. So anybody that enters under this program, all of their income, whether it's U.S. or non-U.S., would also be subject to U.S. taxes. We'll find out how successful that is, but can you see how it's only the extremely well-heeled that can afford to come into the U.S. now? That creates a problem in employment as well for those jobs that up to this point have been basically taken by people that were willing to do the dirtiest of all jobs. So it has broad implications right across the board. But what I really want you to think about is how far down on that confidence ladder that we are. And when people are hopeless, when they feel like there's nothing else they can do, they make choices they would not otherwise make. So that still lies in our future. And you know I pay attention to those confidence numbers all the time. When they drop to the lowest level ever, that will be a black swan event. That may not be initially apparent, but I imagine it will become very clear very shortly down the road. This is probably the most important thing that I talk to you about because this is something you can track yourself. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about this? I can't answer that. What should you do about it? That I can answer. Do yourself a big, huge favor in your family. Become your own central banker. Establish your sound money strategy along with food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. Get it done. Because once that confidence drops to that level, the lowest level ever, we are out of time. So get it done while you still can. And I know coming together in local community to ensure surety in all of the key areas that we need to leave a reasonably stable and pleasant life standard, well, that's local. Coming together on a global basis and getting sound money back in the system again, gotta do it. This is the opportunity, and I know we can. It's 1% that's ruling us. If we get 3%, we can overwhelm it. If we come together, as we're seeing in Iran and many other places in the world, we can make this happen. And until next we meet, please be safe out there. Bye-bye.